Were you surprised? I know we've had a bad feeling for a long time, haven't we? Various different groups have been saying we're hitting a crisis, we're hitting a crisis. But when you heard some of these testimonies, what were your feelings?
Well, I think what this does is tell us what it actually feels like. We've been hearing for a long time that we don't have enough nurses. There are 40,000 nursing vacancies. The NHS is under pressure. And this tells us how that actually feels for the nurses going into work every day and for the patients they're trying to look after. And so we heard from nurses, as you heard there, talking about how much pressure they were feeling, but more importantly, the kind of impact that's having on the patients that they're looking after. And 1 in 10 of the people who came back to us said that on their last shift, they felt that they hadn't been given good enough care, that the care was actually poor. And when you think that nurses go into the profession because they want to look after patients, they want to do a really good job, and you've got 1 in 10 of them saying actually that care was poor. Things like, I went home sobbing because I felt as if the care I delivered was so bad. That really has to make you stop and think.
It's not just the patients, is it? The nurses are being affected by this. I mean, if they're going in and they're feeling like that, how can they then do their jobs to the best of their ability if they're so conscious of being torn and from pillar to post?
Yes, exactly. And we saw some really worrying things from some of the people who came back to us saying they were on antidepressants, or they went into work and the situation was so bad, it was so understaffed, that they felt they were about to have a panic attack. And these are resilient people used to working in difficult situations. So the government needs to take this seriously.
I mean, the government have given us a response to the 3 reports that have come out. The Department of Health spokesperson says, in face of growing demand, the NHS has record funding, so we have more doctors and more nurses on our wards. It goes on, we'll come to the rest of it. But what's your reaction to that first part of that? They say we have more doctors and we have more nurses on our wards.
We don't have the right nurses in the right places, looking with the nurses with the right skills in the challenging areas that we need. And you talk about more nurses, barely more since 2010, and the people they're caring for are sicker and older, and there are more of them, and the pressures are greater.
Of those nurses, 3/4 said that they're doing an extra hour a shift voluntarily. They're doing the overtime unpaid. Now multiply that by every nurse out there, and that's days and days that is reliant on the goodwill of nurses doing overtime because they feel they need to, and that's wrong. That's absolutely exploitation, and it's wrong. It's not good for patients, it's not good for morale of nurses, many of whom are thinking they're going to have to quit because they don't feel well enough to continue. That's all wrong. Now, in terms of the money, it is largely money. I mean, obviously there are other factors as well. The NHS has become incredibly efficient. We've got another report out today from the King's Fund, talks about bed shortages. We've got sometimes a 95% bed occupancy, which means it's unsafe, it's unsustainable. It means operations have to be cancelled. If we have a winter crisis because of flu, they're going to be overwhelmed. Which
we have for the last few years, of course. I mean,
absolutely. Well, actually, it's been pretty OK the last few years.
But there's a run on beds.
But there's always a run on beds. At Christmas, as soon as the temperature drops, we get more admissions for cardiovascular problems and for respiratory problems. So admissions goes up from about 1,000 a day to 2,000 a day. And there's no slack in the system.
But Hilary, what can the government do? We know that money is tight.
Well, they need to act quicker. They're saying that they're going to produce more doctors and more nurses by 2020, but it takes 7 years to train a doctor.
So what should they do then?
Well, they've got to increase. They've got to increase the number of doctors going to medical school. They've got to stop ridiculous notions like getting nurses to pay for their tuition. Instead of having bursaries like they did in the past, they want now to charge them to train.
I mean, if we haven't got the doctors and nurses now, and the crisis is
that's
now.
The third report is if we leave Brexit, there's 60,000. I believe 60,000 people work in the health service from EU countries, and 90,000 in social care. So if we lose them, we've really got a big crisis. And this isn't just these 3 reports. There's reports coming from the Royal College of GPs and from the BMA saying we really need to take this extremely seriously.
Jane, if you could go back to when you first started and you were just coming out of school, or you decided you wanted to go into nursing, would you do it now if you saw the situation, the landscape? Because it seems like a very thankless task.
Well, I'm not a nurse myself, but certainly a lot of the people who speak to us at the Royal College of Nursing, the members we represent, say exactly that. They say, if I was where I was when I started training now, I just wouldn't do it because I'd have to pay for my training. I'd be essentially paying to work because a lot of their training involves working on wards, and then you look at what it's like on the wards and how tough it is, I'm not sure I'd go into it. But on the other hand, as I said, nurses are incredibly resilient people. They're passionate about their job. They want to look after patients well. They still say it's a great job. They just want the government to sort this out, make sure the NHS is funded properly so that they can do what they really want to do and make sure patients get the care they deserve.
OK, Jane Hughes from the Royal College of Nursing and Dr Healy, thanks very much.